how about you? Why do you think it's so pervasive? Stigma is so very pervasive.
I think that one of the major reasons why stigma is so pervasive is because, uh, unfortunately, mental health issues are not just a clinical issue. Mental health issues are also influenced by sort of cultural norms and belief systems as well. So something that Patrick touched on before, uh, something like concepts of masculinity can actually have mental health issues and stressors built into them. So, for example, like a lot of boys in this country are socialized to put a lot of emphasis on self-reliance
Mm.
and to repress their emotions. And they do this at a really early age. And this can be done by parents, caregivers, school systems, and things like that. Unfortunately, the virtues of male strength are a recipe for social and personal isolation. And that combination of things can make it really, it can often lead to feelings of anxiety and depression.
Mm.
Um, Asking for help in mental health issues or being vulnerable enough to talk about those things, that can be interpreted as a violation of what it means to be a man. And it like you said, it's a vicious cycle where the pressures of masculinity don't fit with what it means to be a healthy human being. And so you're struggled in that conflict. And a lot of times people will say, well, mental health issues, that that's not a cultural issue. That's just a clinical thing. And unfortunately, mental health problems can sort of seep in through those cultural avenues, and those are long running lessons, unfortunately.
And I'm making a bad habit of jumping in and giving commentary between my experts. I apologize for that. But you've reminded me, Jacob, when you talk about when we're thinking about it being generational, sometimes those negative messages have been delivered, you touched on it, by people that as children we love and cared about and trusted. So when you're a
Mm-hmm.
trusted caregiver, like in my particular instance, I was very young when my mother made fun of her brother for going to therapy, and she said the words, only crazy people go to therapy. I, at 7 or 8, believed that of course my mother knew what she was talking about, and so I had to teach myself something different. I had to unlearn that message, and that was a barrier for me
Mm-hmm.
as I had to kind of get back on a journey to where I needed to be. Patrick, what about you? Why do you think it's so very pervasive?
Well, I already think touch on that, as far as the fear of the unknown.
For sure.
But I also think that we can discuss later on about the difference between generations, and I think
Yeah.
why it's continued to be an issue for us.
Let's get at that right now, and I'll let you open that up. We talked
All
about
right.
misconceptions with generations. This is the one that I was most excited about.
Right. So I
There's
think
so many misconceptions out there, and I think they differ. If you talk to different generations of folks, you'll hear very different messages, and I like to tell myself it's getting better over time. Excuse me, over time, but maybe it's not. So, Patrick, you got the floor. Talk about it.
Yeah. So when we originally brought up some of this aspect in our first conversation, it's actually brought up 2 points that I want to bring up. One is the power of inheritance. So it's actually not a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing in terms of stigma and how far we have come along. Because, just give you an example, LGBTQ rights. We have come a long way, and it's not because the younger generations are better at it or more savvy or more accepting. It's these generation inheritance of progress that have moved us forward further and further into what should be universal as far as LGBTQ rights. The same go for mental health stigma. We have push them further and further away because we have generations of individual like yourself, Michael. That is,
do not take this from Jacob.
yeah. So I think wise individual like yourself who have more experience advocating for issues like mental health has helped the younger generation, like myself, like Esther or Jacob. I don't know how old Jacob is, but the younger generation to move further away from stigma and discrimination and when it comes to mental illness. So the power of inheritance is actually very, very significant in this case. And then the second thing I want to mention, I think Jacob and Esther touched on that, was the power of media. It's a double-edged sword. So, for the younger generation, I wouldn't consider myself young because I'm going to be 31 in a couple of weeks. But it is a double-edged sword because it can have the power of destruction, or the power of being something viral. So in terms of stigma and discrimination, because there have been so many series that make about mental illness, like I can remember, I'm blanking on the name, but there's one series about high school student who committed suicide. It was on Netflix, and it was a big deal. And it was almost advertised as like dangerous for people to watch, especially younger kids, because it's their prime target. The audience is teenagers. And that just show that we have come a long way in terms of try to reduce the stigma and discrimination. And because we have the media, it can have both side effects, negative or positive. And I think the younger generations are empowering themselves to use that tool to spread message of hope, message of recovery, and use that social media to their advantage to reduce stigma and discrimination, because many of them experience a mental health condition or mental illness, and they just simply post it on Facebook or Instagram, and someone will jump into provide them with some guidance. Whether it's not a good, people are paying attention to social media and what is posted.
We had a conversation here at Brother Be Well just earlier today with a young man who was overcoming homelessness, and he talked about how social media was kind of his conduit to services. So a lot of what you just said resonated with me.